Good morning from the sunny state of Texas. My name is Andy Higgins. I work for a company called IMCollaboration, which is a consultancy. And today I'd like to talk to you about the state of instant messaging interconnectivity. I added the word interconnectivity on the slide because really I'm going to go through the state of instant messaging from a historical perspective in this presentation. And then I'm going to talk about interconnectivity, which I consider to be an important aspect of instant messaging. So let's introduce myself. I have worked from the first with IBM. I was in IBM in 1998 when I worked with the first version of SameTime. I wore my SameTime shirt right here today, especially for you. I still have it. This is 20-something years old. And I've been involved with instant messaging solutions ever since. One of my important jobs was when I worked at Bank of America as the SameTime collaboration architect. And I was involved there when they moved from IBM to the Microsoft stack. At the time, it was SameTime to LCS, OCS. And so I saw the importance of coexistence and interconnectivity there when we were moving from one platform to another. Back at IBM between 2004 and 2009, I was in the SWAT team, the competitive technical sales team, specializing on SameTime. And now since 2009, I've been independent, and I specialize in migration, coexistence, and interoperability of email, instant messaging, and enterprise content management systems. So, what will I be talking about today? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of IM. This particular presentation I've been doing since 2000. I used to do it at IBM, I did it at Bank of America. I explained to my colleagues and other people where instant messaging was coming from, where we were going. And so as I say, I've always been interested in this. So I've adapted this presentation as the years have gone by, and I've worked on it to produce the latest one, which you're seeing now. So we're going to look at that. And then I'm going to look at how interconnectivity between instant messaging services and what I classify as an instant messaging service, of course, has changed over the years. Interconnectivity, I think, is important because it's needed if we do a large-scale migration. I was involved in a migration of 150,000 mail users recently, and they had 2 instant messaging services, and that migration took 2 years. And so they needed to integrate the 2 instant messaging services over that period of time. Similarly, coexistence in companies who have multiple collaborative tools. There's a lot of companies nowadays who don't just have one IM tool or one collaborative tool. And then also, of course, why not? Collaboration between companies. That's what we would like. Currently, most people collaborate with email, and it's old-fashioned. We would like to see more people collaborating using things like instant messaging collaborative services. So sorry for the mess with this very, very busy slide. I'm not going to go through and read every little bit of it, but I wanted to show the immensity of instant messaging. It's been around a long time. You know, you look at the first one, AOL. It started in 1997, lasted 20 years because it shut down 2017. Yahoo, the other instant messenger original, that also died 20 years after it started. Skype, for instance, has been around almost as long as those 2, but it's still huge. I want to mention something about Skype here that some people know, maybe some people don't. Microsoft bought Skype back in 2011, and I seriously think they bought it just so they could use the word Skype, because Skype for Business, which was Microsoft's instant messaging product, really had nothing to do with Skype, the public instant messaging chat service that had been around for a long time. However, it's a very interesting point that even though Skype for Business with Microsoft developed a certain way, Microsoft are now using some of the Skype technology and adding that to Teams rather than the Skype for Business technology and bringing that into Teams. So that's an interesting point around the Microsoft technology, but it also lends itself to the fact that it's not as interconnected. It's not as interconnected as it was, Skype for Business, as it moves on to Teams. We'll come across that a little later. There's a bunch of other instant messaging services. I used to mention QQ back about 10 years ago. Nobody had ever heard of QQ. And of course, because it's Chinese, there were 800 million people using it. It was the most used instant messaging service in the world. But it's mainly because it's Chinese, right? Because of their situation. Further down here, I've always included Telegram, which we're using today, and I logged on to Telegram. You can chat with me on Telegram, but not during the presentation. I put a little bit more information in about it because I didn't know that it was involved. It involved two Russian brothers who founded the social network VK, which I'm sure most of my listeners today are quite familiar with. They're currently sitting at 400 million active users. So that's a pretty big instant messaging group. And you can look at these other numbers. I'm not going to go into it. Lots of people use instant messaging. That's the point. However, the demise of AOL, that means the demise is the downslide of AOL instant messaging. This is to show in the US how many people stopped using AOL. But at the same time, worldwide instant messaging accounts are going up. This number actually applies to not just public IM, but corporate IM too. And it's published by a company called the Radicati report. I include a link in one of the next slides to that report, the latest report, because this, as you can see, goes to 2019, and it's been updated recently. And we see this is what they see it today and how it's actually going. And the first thing I noticed about that, there are actually more instant messaging accounts than people in the world, which is interesting. But there is a comment by them themselves in the report about that, which I include on the next slide. The report link is in the bottom of the slide here when you get to see the slides later. Anyway, so as you can see, lots and lots of instant messaging accounts. Yes, notes on the previous numbers. They include business and consumer adoption. And also, they've pointed out something very interesting here. Since there's no general interoperability between the different IM systems, right? There's nothing like SMTP that links email together. We see that people actually get multiple accounts on different systems in order to be able to join the different systems, which counts for the more than the number of people in the world having instant messaging accounts. Okay, so let's move on. So what's going on with public IM? I mean, there was, this trend down on some of the public IMs, but some of them are sticking around. So I had a thought about that, and I think many of you might have thoughts on the same matter. I think the ones that are still around are platform specific, like WhatsApp being mobile only, and Apple iMessage, or they've been combined with some other functionality like Facebook Messenger or QQ, which is combined with the Chinese social platform, or they were able to monetize their product. I mean, and that's the key thing. Monetize as in make money with it. I don't think AOL or Yahoo Messenger were able to do that from their perspective, or for whatever reasons, because Skype was able to monetize themselves. I don't want to discuss that any further, but the ones that died didn't move to mobile effectively, I don't think. They did integrate with other functionality, as well as the ones that survived, and they couldn't monetize the product, excuse me. So again, I have to apologize for some of these slides being a little funky. It's because of the template that I dumped on them, but the information's there. Popular corporate instant messaging services. So for the longest time, IBM, same time, or HCL, should I say, same time has been around. Then Microsoft, Lync, and Skype for Business, essentially the same thing. They called it Skype for Business once they bought the Skype, and they stopped calling it Lync, which was previous Office Communication Server, or previously Live Communication Server. It goes back. Microsoft have a habit of changing the names on the product. Then, of course, you have Cisco's product, Unified Messaging, which is essentially a pay-for Jabber service, and then Google Hangouts, which I don't believe is going to be around much longer because they're moving to chat. And if you see down the bottom of here, these are the latest, the most popular corporate instant messaging service, what I call instant messaging, but more people nowadays call them collaborative services, but they're based on instant messaging techniques, right? Presence and awareness. If somebody's there or not, you get to see that. So Teams and Slack, I would say, are pretty huge. Very interesting. If none of you heard, December the 1st, Salesforce purchased Slack. So there's a big move by Salesforce against Microsoft. Then you have Cisco Jabber and Cisco WebEx Teams. They're full corporate solutions. And Google Chat, which is in Google Workspace, which I've yet to see, or I've yet to look at carefully because it's only just been brought out, Google Workspace. So those are your corporate instant messaging services. Of course, HCL same time still stays around, but I'm interested in where that's going from the perspective of these other more developed instant messaging solutions. So, as I said from the Radicati report, since there's no interoperability between IM services, people have multiple accounts. So what we'd like is instant messaging interconnectivity, so we don't have multiple clients on our machine, right? We have all these competitive products, but none of them talk to each other. Now, most of them seem to think that they can offer a guest service and allow other people to come in to use external services to join and collaborate. Now, that's all fine and good, but there's the authentication issue right there. Because you've got to authenticate to see data, right? You don't want to just let anybody in as a guest. So there's currently no interconnectivity drive like there was with email. And as we see email diminishing in importance, and I'm glad to see it go. I've worked in email for 30 years, but I'm glad to see it go. I like some of these newer, better collaborative services. But as email diminishes in importance and collaboration services increase, I think we need to figure out a better way of allowing collaboration over these platforms. Basically, it can be done by two ways. As I said, the guest, you give the guest, that's the way it's done. That's how Same Time does it. You give guest access. However, there's more to it than that. And I try to put that together in a sentence here, but you need to be able to allow interoperability with basic connectivity like chat and text and audio video between something like Slack and Teams and Same Time. If you've got audio video, presence and awareness interoperability was always provided back in the day, but it doesn't seem to be true nowadays. And then we can allow on top of that certain services to be shared through apps based on joint authorization using something like OAuth in a more complex way. I'm not pretending to say I know the answer here, but I think there needs to be more than just giving people guest access. So this was the instant messaging protocol. Well, these are the instant messaging protocols that exist today. And SIP was always a very important one to me because that actually allowed different services to connect. Skype for Business actually, or what's it called, Lync and Skype for Business supported the SIP mechanism, as did HCL. Same Time in the same time gateway. So you could actually talk to each other. There's a thing. You could share presence and awareness, and you could chat through these different protocol, through the SIP protocol. However, importantly, as we move on to Teams on the Microsoft side, Teams have moved away from using SIP for chat, and they use HTTPS, the good old use for anything protocol used by Microsoft for its chat service. And so immediately we have a problem there when it's if you're trying to talk to the same time gateway with Teams, you're not going to be able to do it. On top of that, there's always been Xmpp sitting around, which is used by Jabber. That's another very interesting open protocol. Nobody seems to want to use it apart from Jabber. IBM had a bash at using it with the same time gateway, but then decided not to support it anymore. And then I see another protocol that's important now that HCL same time did use at one point with the gateway to establish, well, actually it was used with instant messaging audio video to establish peer-to-peer networking between two endpoints on the same time network. They used the ICE protocol, and Microsoft Teams is using that too. So I don't know the protocol well enough to say that it could be a protocol that we could share across to do audio video between different systems, like same time, if it was using audio video, or Slack and Teams. But that's actually the protocol that basically says, I'm here, I need to talk to somebody here. And then you establish the actual type of protocol, like the audio video or whatever else protocol you need to transmit data across independent of ICE. ICE just figures out where you are, which is sort of what SIP did back in the day. Anyway, at this point in the presentation, I used to explain how SIP worked, because instant messaging interconnectivity worked and was supported by that protocol. I'm not going to do it now because Microsoft have abandoned SIP, and HCL have also seemingly abandoned it too, with same time gateway not having a new release at all. So I think HCL are reimagining what they're going to do with interconnectivity, and I'm not privy to those conversations right now. And Microsoft, well, they just seem to do whatever they want to do, but they're certainly not interested in connectivity, right? In interconnectivity at the moment. So, federated intermessaging federation. This is an interesting topic because back in the 2000s, when I worked for the bank, I was part of setting up a discussion group amongst all the banks in the US, and we used to go to New York and have discussions every month on this. And we thought we could talk about federation and then ask the companies like Microsoft and IBM at the time and other companies to provide federation to allow our instant messaging products to talk to each other. We had some great times in New York, and we came up with some good documents, and we passed them on to those companies, and they pretty much didn't pay any attention to us. So that's the way it goes, I suppose. Maybe they did, but in the end, nothing really came of that. Federated instant messaging networks, to me, are the ones that are open, and they allow other instant messaging networks to message their users. Okay. There are 4 different types of federation. Now we're going to go into the different types of federation to talk about how we could possibly provide interconnectivity in the future with what exists today. There's direct federation, clearinghouse federation, which was a great hope back in the day. Clearinghouse is what we talked about when we were the banks all together. We were thinking, well, we need people to become a clearinghouse and have a centralized connection for all different IM services to come through. AOL actually was going to become a clearinghouse, and then they decided not to. As a company I'm going to mention later, Nextplane, they actually still offer a great option here. And then we have enhanced federation and open federation, which are 2 other types of federation that have been played around with. So direct instant messaging federation basically allows you to have direct point-to-point coexistence. So it's you configure, excuse me, the direct connection. So there's nothing else. You just have two services and they configure together through access points. Same time gateway to Skype for Business used to do it this way. You could have Skype for Business with an external access point connecting directly to a same time gateway and share presence and awareness and chat that way. It's not really open because it's defined. It works like this. There's lots of configuration required, but it's very secure because you configure every point, point to point. This is the clearinghouse federation, which is very similar to direct federation, apart from the fact you have a clearinghouse in the middle. So you connect to a clearinghouse, they're the ones who connect to everybody, and they're the ones who allow you through. And then they charge you for that, which is a nice model. I've used CH, the clearinghouse. Apologies for any Swiss people on the call. But this is how Nextplane works, and I'll come to them in a few minutes. By the way, I don't work for Nextplane, but I like their solution. Enhanced Instant Federation was supposedly brought out by Microsoft, and it's what Office 365 used to do with Skype for Business, and it allowed two-way, it allowed DNS records to actually recognize where the instant messaging server was by the use of SRV records, very similar to how email uses MX records, okay? And then Open Federation takes it one step further. It's basically Open Enhanced Federation, which is what I just talked about. And that has all the DNS records and an A record involved and allows for XMPP federation too. Microsoft did pursue this for a time, but as I said, I don't believe Teams works at all with this. So, oh yes, I've got a graphic like this. Open Federation, this is how it works. You've got domain B there, and domain A requests the information from DNS, and then is able to connect to domain B and similarly to domain C. So it's a very, as you see, it's a very similar paradigm to email, whereas you find out where the server is you're going to connect to, and then you go there. Okay, as a comment here, you might think that you could set up federation open in one direction and direct in the other, but you can't because Microsoft don't support it. And that was with Skype for Business. Again, they don't support it at all with Teams. But that's the reason back in the day that Office 365 or Skype for Business could not directly federate with same time, even if you had a same time gateway. Because the same time gateway would only connect with a direct connection. And Skype for Business was a an enhanced open federation in the opposite direction. So yeah, I've just been said that with the advent of Teams, with the appearance of Teams no longer using open federation, we're back to the only way for interoperability of systems being a clearinghouse, which might be the best way anyway. What's IBM HCL doing? Finally, I get around to talking about IBM HCL at the IBM, well, not IBM, but HCL conference, yes. I'm very fond of same time. I know it's a very good system, just like Notes is a great system. It's not been kept up to date recently in the way Teams and Slack have moved forwards. It's a shame because Same Time Advanced at the time had some channel functionality in it, which is like Teams and Slack. And I do want to mention channel functionality there. The first company that I saw was a company called Mindalign that provide channel-based chats, which allowed people to search on different channels and be members of different channels. That was around in the 2000s and used by a lot of the banks, which is where I saw it. And their traders used to use it to trade data, and I won't say any more about that, but they weren't meant to use it. But that was a product called Mindalign, and Microsoft bought Mindalign back in the late 2000s, and I believe they've used that technology to move forward with Teams, which is basically channel-based IM technology. So get back to same time here. The last updated release, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it's version 901 of the same time gateway. I believe they still support it. They don't support Xmpp, but they do support direct federation using SIP. But there's not much out there now that connects to SIP. For interconnectivity requirements, they recommend using Nextplane, which is always a good recommendation. So this is what Nextplane is. It provides federation management between a variety of IM platforms. I believe this is an old slide, so it doesn't include Teams. It doesn't include, I'm not sure if Slack's on there, but they're all covered. Anything that is anything is covered by this product. And they do all sorts of interconnectivity between SIP, Xmpp, presence mapping. They even do some audio video sharing between the different systems. I've always liked this service, and apparently this is the service that really, if you're looking for an interconnectivity provider between two different systems of instant messaging, these are the guys to go to. This is what it looks like. As you can see, this is some of my old configuration. I just took a screenshot of this, but you can, provision domains, and you decide who gets to talk to whom. So let's get back a little bit to the corporate IM coexistence. Possible scenarios of corporate IM coexistence would be when somebody's migrating from one to the other, and you have a period of time in between when you have to have both systems, and in order not to lose working between users, you've got to have both systems running, or two or more companies merging. That happens all the time. Something to make a note of, the word caveat, it means warning, and it's in Latin. The main warning is that you cannot support the same domain on two instant messaging services. So unlike email, where you can use something called a smart host and give one email service the ability to receive the email, but if it doesn't see it in the directory, to pass it on to another email service, you can't do that with instant messaging. So that's more of a problem for a migration scenario that you have to deal with, typically with subdomains and mapped subdomains. And then also I'd like to point out, if coexistence is over an extended period of time, you should consider buddy list synchronization tools, either mapping buddy lists. You can get tools that migrate buddy lists, although that's not necessarily what people want. Mapping buddy lists in a coexistence scenario is a good idea, because just for the same reason, if somebody migrates from one email system or one collaboration system to another, they would disappear on the original service. But so you need to map those across without users being confused that people are disappearing. So an overview. In overview for the whole presentation, and to come to a close soon, I think clearinghouses are the future now. I didn't used to think that. I used to want to think that, but because I used to think, well, we could use SIP, but SIP never provided full functionality of all these wonderful collaborative tools. So clearinghouses, I think, are the future. I said Microsoft used to have the best options for open federation, but have decided not to support that model anymore. They're off to take over the world, as usual. Interconnectivity, in my opinion, is in demand for B2B, but not necessarily to B2C, because that means business to business and business to customer. Because in business to customer, chat portals have really allowed users to visit and come in. So the whole guest model supports B2C quite well. But B2B, we need secure instant messaging protocols in order to connect through. And of course, you have to put that on top of the security model, because not everybody wants total openness. Let's see, have I got any more points? No. Oh yes. Yeah, so no huge demand for open interconnectivity seen yet. I don't know why. Back in the day, there was, I remember working on instant email interconnectivity, and people used to be so annoyed that they couldn't send attachments to each other across different systems, and they worked hard to get that to work. And we have an interoperable, with the MIME attachments on SMTP, we have standards that allow us to do that. But you would think with instant messaging and, as I say, advanced instant messaging collaboration tools becoming larger, bigger and bigger, especially during the COVID pandemic, we would see more of a demand for open interconnectivity, but I've not really seen it as of yet. So I would like to thank you for coming to my presentation about a little trip in time about instant messaging over the years and where I think it's going. This will be in the slides. My name's Andy Higgins, blah, 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 LinkedIn. I'm on all the normal stuff, and you can even call me if you want. Although I very rarely pick my phone up and leave a message. Anyway, yeah, I'd like to thank you for that, and I'll open it for questions.
Энди, спасибо вам большое за ваше выступление. Я напоминаю, что мы сейчас переходим к последовательному переводу. Пожалуйста, давайте небольшие паузы для того, чтобы вас могли перевести.
Andy, thank you very much for your presentation. I'd like to remind you that within the Q&A session, we'll have a consecutive translation. It means that the speaker should have a pause to let the translation going. Is that all right?
It is absolutely okay.
Да, спасибо большое, понял вас.
Я хочу вам сообщить, что у нас нет вопросов от нашей аудитории. Я думаю, что все было понятно. Спасибо.
We don't see any questions from our audience coming so far. I believe that your presentation has been very clear. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad when there are no questions, that means I covered everything.
Да, на здоровье. Мне нравится, когда нет вопросов. Это значит, что я, наверное, все темы раскрыла, которые было необходимо покрыть.
Да, я полностью с вами согласна.
Indeed, I do agree with you.
Ну что ж, на сегодня наша трансляция в зале Браво окончена. Благодарим всех наших слушателей.
So for today, our live session in the Bravo Hall is over. Thanks to each and every participant of this conference for today.
И сейчас вы сможете увидеть в трансляции программу следующего дня. Он будет очень насыщенный. Обязательно к нам присоединяйтесь.
Now we'll see and show you the agenda for the upcoming day, which is tomorrow. The agenda will be very intense, so we'll be happy to see you here tomorrow. Join us, please.
Всем спасибо. До свидания.
Thank you very much.